She tried to save $300. She lost her house, her job, and her own name. The insurance claim. The Seattle grocery lot didn't promise anything dramatic. Fine rain, gray sky, carts clanging into curbs, people hustling with bags. Paul looked like one of them, stooped, worn jacket, a face without features. Inside, he was already storing anger. In the glove box, a bank letter, mortgage rate increase. On his phone, credit card payment overdue. At work, they cut his hours, small items on their own, heavy in a pile. Paul even kept a wrongs list on his phone, fees, penalties, weird wording from letters. He read it over and over as if to prove they were really robbing him. He shut off the radio and eased the wheel, glanced at the entrance banner. The store speakers chirped, "Auto care sale today only," then the scrape. His car kissed a yellow post already skinned by dozens of others. Short sound, nasty. Paul swore under his breath like admitting a sin. Got out, looked, bumper cracked and scuffed, not fatal, enough to tank the day. He snapped a photo and added a line to the list, post $300. He checked his policy, deductible $500, repair about $3. Simple, insulting math he'd pay himself. 300 versus 500, he thought. The numbers ticked like a metronome, stoking the heat. Nobody cared. A teen in headphones passed without a glance. Wind plastered a plastic bag to the bumper like a price tag. Paul gave a bitter smile. The world saying, your life now costs $300. He sat, gripped the wheel. That old unfairness rose in his chest. He'd paid premiums for years. When something finally happened, all he got was a crack and a bill out of his pocket. 300 versus 500, he repeated. Simple arithmetic, the kind that flips a life. Paul sat in the kitchen holding a plastic coffee lid. TV droned about gas prices. He didn't hear it. In the window, the bumper's crack flashed. The math looped like a stuck record. 300 versus 500. He scrolled the notes folder, the one for wrongs. Late fee $35. Hours cut. Bank rejected forms, wrong pen, pointless, real pebbles in a pocket. This bumper was the last one. At noon, he tried for a $300 microloan, denied in 10 minutes, insufficient score. Paul stared at the screen and felt like a line in an algorithm. His chest tightened. The system laughed at him. Evening, he called his neighbor, the strange one, painted his fence in January. Frost bloomed on the wet paint, fixed a grill once with a hair dryer. Meat tasted like plastic. "Come on," the neighbor said, smirking. "Make it look like half the car got kissed. They'll pay for sure." Paul smirked back, but the line landed different. "Make it look, get what's yours." He walked to the car with a wrench, heart thumping like a bank job, metal weight in his hand. He paused, cleared the past due alert on the phone with his thumb, raised the wrench and swung. The plastic cried, another gouge. The bumper now looked truly hit. The neighbor's cat sat under the steps, watching like a stern inspector. Paul smiled. Quality control. He took more photos. They looked convincing, almost pretty. Back inside, he poured coffee. His hands shook. "This isn't fraud," he told the empty room. "It's compensation, balance." He opened the photos again. The scratches looked like art, an absurd installation priced at $300. Monday morning, he went to the shop the insurer picked. Plain building, oil and rubber smell. Behind the counter, a man in his 50s, neat gray beard, badge, Harris, Appraiser, laminated ruler in one hand, soup thermos in the other. Harris nodded and walked out, no chit-chat. He circled the bumper, clicking his pen, sometimes leaned in and sniffed like smelling paint. "You set a post in a parking lot?" he asked at last. Yeah, grocery lot, Paul said. Harris set the little ruler against a scrape. First mismatch, this line runs horizontal, a post leaves vertical marks. Paul swallowed. Maybe I didn't see rain and all. Harris didn't react, leaned at the headlight, drew a breath. The second, depth is too much for parking speed, too hard a hit for your story. Paul nodded, eyes skating. Could have clipped it at an angle. Harris made a note and moved to the door. And third, fresh scratch here, but it's already on your photos. Very honest photos, Mr. Paul, like you wanted every detail known ahead of time. He straightened and met Paul's eyes, a long second, cold in Paul's chest. I'll file my report, Harris said. They'll be in touch. No hint of feeling, just empty professionalism. He took a sip from the thermos and wrote more. Paul stood there like a kid who'd already failed the test. In the rearview, Paul could still see Harris's face. Blank, ruler in hand, a doctor with a diagnosis he wouldn't sugarcoat. A week after Harris, the first letter arrived. Crest on top, bold type, additional information required. Inside, boxes. Next day came a second letter with the same boxes, different font, the form name off by one letter. A third repeated both but called itself Circumstance Clarification Extended. 3 different documents with the same squares, black comedy in pure form. First call on Wednesday, a flat female voice with gum. Mr. Paul, can you confirm it was a post? Pauses in the wrong spots like she read to the chew. Paul said yes, heard his story drift from the written one. Second call, a polite man, same questions, new word order. Paul tangled again. One version, side hit, another, front. He no longer remembered what he'd said first, static built in his head. Papers stacked on the kitchen table, shoving salt and pepper aside. He stared at them and saw not forms, but a diagram of guilt. Friday he called them himself, hopped from department to department. Every voice, your claim is under review. Finally someone said, if discrepancies persist, the policy may be rescinded. The matter will be escalated to compliance. Escalated echoed like a sentence. He hung up. The story was no longer his. The letters and fonts owned it now. Paul poured whiskey. It tasted metallic. In the window, the neighbor's cat sat like a clerk taking minutes. The letter came in a gray envelope. Paul opened it with coffee in hand. The first line fired like a shot. Your insurance policy is rescinded due to a finding of fraud. Then detail, loss of trust, breach of contract, denial of benefits, report entered into nationwide insurance database. He read it 3 times, no doubt, final, at the bottom in bold, you are ineligible to bind new policies with licensed carriers for the term of the sanction. That same day the boss called him in. The office smelled like fertilizer. The man watered a ficus while speaking of corporate values. We can't keep someone whose honesty is in question, he said, straightening leaves. Reputation issue, I'm sure you understand. Paul nodded while something broke inside. The firing landed like a receipt handed over. By evening, the HOA chat had it. Hear about 3rd Street, fraud guy, lost his insurance. Someone added a smirking emoji. Paul watched the thread and felt the house turn transparent, whisper behind every window. Back home, another envelope waited. Bright banner, a new loyalty program for our customers. He laughed once mean. First they canceled him, then they offered points. That night he sat in the car and looked at the bumper, the one that started it. The crack looked foolish now. He ran his palm along it and thought, that's my price, 300 versus 500, now add job, neighbor's name. No scream, no tears, just the sense that every choice had become stamped paper. Rain sheeted, wipers chattered, the road shone oily black. Paul drove home late, thinking about bills and no job. The car rolled itself. He stared into nothing. Red lights flared ahead. A family minivan braked hard. Paul hit his brakes. Tires slid. The thud split the night. His car lurched like it took a fist. Silence after the impact was louder than any siren, then a child's cry. Paul jumped out. Inside the van sat a couple and two kids. The mother wrapped the boy. The father pounded on a jammed door. Their eyes met his, the father's full of fear and fury. Sirens rose, red and blue strobed the wet asphalt. Police, medics, tow truck. A paramedic crouched over the girl and tossed a question over his shoulder. Insurance current. Paul froze. Policies rescinded, he said barely. The officer wrote it down without comment. On Paul's windshield, a pale rectangle showed where the I'm insured sticker had been. He de-peeled it off yesterday. The glue mark stayed like a joke. Then the nightmare cadence: hospital, treatment bills, minivan repair, lawyers, each sum in its own envelope. 5,000, 10, 30, the final roll-up, $150,000. He didn't have a tenth. To cover anything, he listed the house. The agent's calm voice made it sound like a couch, not a home. That evening Paul sat in an empty living room, faint picture shadows on the wall. Everything was going: job, neighbors, name, now the house, all for saving $300. Outside the rain kept at it. In the streetlight the bumper's crack gleamed wet. Paul looked and knew there wasn't any arithmetic now, only a debt he'd carry to the end. Selling the house took under an hour. The agent slid papers over. Paul signed page after page without reading. Each signature cut out a piece of memory: the turkey smell at Christmas, small footprints on the stairs, the warm light of the fireplace. All turned into numbers that walked straight into someone else's hospital bill. A week later, he ducked into a pharmacy for painkillers. The family was there. The girl's arm in a cast, flipping a magazine, the mother comparing vitamins. The father looked up and met his eyes. No hatred there, just a dry statement. "We paid on time," he said quietly. Paul nodded, heart tightened, words stuck. The mother steered the girl to the register as if Paul didn't exist. By the door sat a donation box. On it, a photo of his bumper, that crack. It had become the emblem of the crash and the help drive. They'd set the box on a shelf with a bright sticker, special $2.99. The black humor was obvious. Paul even smiled, and then the lump rose. He dropped a couple bucks and walked back into the rain. The old math rang in his head: 300 versus 500. Only now they were someone else's numbers, someone else's pain, someone else's pills. His mistake had become their invoice. He walked to the car slowly. The bumper shone with its wet scar. In the light it looked like a wound that won't close. The neighbor's cat sat by the curb, the same witness from his repair night. The eyes were cold and straight, a last judgment. Paul started the engine. Rain drummed on the roof, steady as signatures on fresh forms. House, job, name gone, only the debt remained. 300 versus 500, he said to himself, one last time.